Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start with the topic consanguinity. And in the syllabus of UPSC anthropology, this comes under consanguineous and non-consanguineous matings and the genetic effects of it. So, before proceeding on to this topic, let's have a background look at what these terms are and how they are related to overall anthropology. So this topic it comes under population genetics, and right now via this topic we are talking about mating pattern in humans. Mating pattern in humans, how they mate, and we study this because it is mating which is also known as reproduction. So reproduce, the word which is made up of two root words re and produce, which means to make copies of oneself. To make copies of oneself. And we are talking about Homo sapiens, who are a species of animal kingdom. Because if you look at the final phylogenetic tree of Homo sapiens, you will find that we ultimately belong to one particular life form, one particular variety of life form, that is animal variety. So, and that's why many rules of animal kingdom applies on us. Then we are talking about evolution in animal kingdom. So evolution in animal kingdom, which means which can take two forms whenever we see it. That is mating and inheritance. So mating is the mechanism by which life proceeds ahead. Life transmits from one generation to the next. So mating is the procedure, and you may equate mating with reproduction. Then inheritance is the actual process by which mating it transmits genes from one generation to the next. So both are interchangeable terms, but there is a slight difference between the two. First, mating is just the procedure, is just the mechanism, and it can vary because if you look at plant kingdom, there are many plant species that reproduce via asexual reproduction, whereas most of the animal kingdom, most of the species of animal kingdom, they mate via sexual reproduction. So here we are talking about activity, and inheritance is the result, the outcome of the activity. So overall, evolution, which travels via two processes, mating and inheritance, it leads to procession of life, a grand procession which goes ahead, and in which the better genes, the better traits, they are transmitted ahead. Up now, better how? Because life is not a race, is not about integrating the best of the genes, is not about being the winner. It's about the genes that you inherited. The inherited gene, they need to be best one, that is assorted. Why is that? Because every individual, he has he or she has a limited pool of a confined pool of genes, because यहाँ पे inheritance a particular offspring का is he or she is going to inherit only from his or her parents. So first, यहाँ पे जो भी उसके inherited trait होंगे, even if they were assorted and better traits, but still जीन पूल में वही ट्रेट होंगे जो मदर एंड उसके फादर के पास है. एंड दैट्स व्हाई an individual inherit binary form, or in scientific terminology it is known as diploid form of genes, जिसको हम alleles भी बोलते हैं. So this is it. This is the basic background that you must be aware of before proceeding on to this chapter. Then let's come to Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens and its mating patterns. So how do we mate? How do these members of Homo sapiens mate with each other? Do we mate randomly? Mate randomly? So mating here is different from sexual activity. Sexual activity can be a recreational activity, but mating is about producing children, producing kids. So to whom we are going to produce children with? How are we going to produce children? How do we mate? This mating pattern, as you know, as most of the UPSC aspirants, they belong to the great ancient culture of India. We know in Indian culture and in culture of many other countries as well, they are marriage an institution that is built to regulate the procreation and mating, mating and procreation, because the reproduction thing, it is not limited up to this particular sexual activity or producing children. It is much more than that. It's also inculcate the child rearing practices, the survival of offspring, the care of offspring. और वो आपको याद होगा वो R2K selection, that we Homo sapiens, we in present time, we follow the selective practices in which we have fewer children and more care. So it's a whole lifetime of effort. At least it's around 10 to 12 years of continuous effort. That's how children are reared and raised. Continuous effort. So this institution, marriage, it regulates everything. So first, in Indian culture, in many culture, marriage regulate and control mating patterns. And then this answered the question: do we mate randomly? So we do not mate randomly. We have a well-established institution that is there to ensure that we mate in particular um, way, according to particular customs. We mate according to some religious scientific principles, and then we are there, our whole family is there to raise the child up to a survivable age. So this is the gist of. Then second question: are mating patterns in all species, all cultures, all groups of people same in Homo sapiens? No, it is not. We have different variety. There are different criteria, and you can say uh, different governing principles about mating patterns. So, and that is a result of diversity. Diversity itself is a result of the geography. So ultimately, different geography will have different mating patterns, and those mating patterns, which may be equated to marriage, they are different in different cultures, um, different areas, different localities, different geographies. But most of them, they can be, most of the marriage pattern, they can be clubbed into two groups, prohibitions and preferences. So prohibitions are who you should not marry and preferences are who you should marry, and उसके लिए बहुत सारे नियम हैं. Especially like in India there is caste endogamy, means you must marry within your caste, but we also follow gotra exogamy. So it which means even if you are required to marry within your caste, you should avoid marrying within your own gotra. So this is typical feature of Indian caste system, the traditional caste system. Then उसके बाद जो modern society है, there are many marriage rules are coming up, but overall, when group or family preferences are taken into account, most of the marriage rules they are either prohibitory or preferential. फिर जो modern rules हैं, they have changed a lot. Let's say they are live in relationship, they are single mothers, single parents, single parent household, then uh, intercaste and interfaith marriages. All right. Now, next group of mating pattern can be clubbed into inside versus outside. Inside versus outside. That's a very common group which I would like to put ahead in these simple layman terms. And the purpose of my division is to provide a broad outline of mating pattern that are related by blood. So everything that every person that is related to you will be your consanguine. Consanguine is a Latin word which can be separated into two root words, con and sanguine, which means with blood. So all your blood relative they are consanguine. So here inside versus outside is consanguine and non-consanguine. Consanguine and non-consanguine, consanguineous and adjective. So this inside versus outside is also gliding upon the same topic, the topic that we pick up. We need to club the mating patterns according to blood. So inside versus outside debate is it rests on which society they marry their own blood relative, blood relatives. So those society that marry their blood relatives, they are known as consanguineous, and those who do not, non-consanguineous. So it's a very broad criteria, because most of the society they prefer to marry outside their blood relatives. So most of the society is non-consanguineous, but there are some who prefer their own blood relatives. फिर देखते हैं how it affects the genetic pool. So there are two general pattern of mating in human population: random and non-random mating. Random mating, which means you do not consider anything, you do not take into account any criteria for producing children, and children are produced randomly. And non-random, which means you have certain criteria, certain obligations, certain objections, certain preferences, और वो उसके लिए जो marriage pattern है. Then deviation from random mating can occur in two general directions. People who are related can either marry more frequently or less frequently than they would by chance. So this is what I have described in inside versus outside debate. That those who marry inside, which means marry their relatives, uh, they are known as consanguineous, and those who do not, they are known as non-consanguineous. And its frequency matters a lot. If it's just a one-off chance, because of scarcity, because of any natural disaster, because of need, or any other factor, then its frequency will be less, so its deleterious effects, its harmful effects will be less. But if this frequency is more, such as in many South Indian societies, in many Muslim communities, and in many communities from across the world, they have higher frequency of consanguineous mating. And in medium term, it is it is shown that there are harmful effects associated with higher frequency of consanguineous mating. Then in the former case, the mating system is one of inbreeding and later of outbreeding. You can equate them with inside versus outside or inbreeding versus outbreeding. Then assortative mating is another important mating type which deviates from random mating. So assortative, it means you have higher preferences. It's like when you buy any commodity, you have many preferences, you have many criteria that your commodity, it should be of leather made or cotton or particular article type, then it should be black or blue by color, then it should have this sheen, this texture, this size, it should be L, XL, then it should be in this particular price range from this particular brand. So these are preferences. In the same way, when we put preferences, when we have much more selective criteria to to choose our mates, especially during marriages. So this type of system, it is known as assortative mating. So it also deviates from random mating, because random mating is the absence of preferences. So when there are preferences, it is obviously going to put away from random mating. Then inbreeding is defined as mating between close relatives, blood relatives. When the frequency of marriage between close relatives exceed the expected frequency under random mating, it is called inbreeding. And when it decreases, it is outbreeding. So there are two factors here, or two, um, you can say, conditions here, that any mating pattern can be defined as inbreeding only when first this mating pattern is between blood relatives, which means consanguineous, and second, it should have higher frequency, which means in cultural term, it means that the whole institution of consanguineous mating, it is regulated by a particular social group, because higher frequency or high frequency of um, blood matings, consanguineous mating happen only when this particular institution is regulated by any social group, such as we can take the South Indian communities or the Muslim communities. So here the whole practice is regulated by their caste in case of South Indian communities, and a whole religion in case of Muslim community. So this pattern of higher frequency, when occurs in blood relatives, it is known as outbreeding, inbreeding. And when the same higher frequency it occurs between non-blood relatives, it is known as outbreeding. So let's take example of the marriage pattern which you see in your proximity, in your neighborhood. तो यहाँ पे जो जितने भी पर्टिकुलर जो शादी आप देखते हैं, और लेट्स से अग्रवाल है, अब उस अग्रवाल ने अपनी कास्ट में ही शादी की है, देन दिस इज अ काइंड ऑफ असॉर्टेटिव मीटिंग, कि हाँ, दे आर प्रेफरेंसेस। फिर शादी अपनी कास्ट में की है, लेकिन जिससे की है वो ब्लड रिलेटिव नहीं है, नॉन ब्लड रिलेटिव है, सो दिस प्रैक्टिस इट विल बी नोन एज आउटब्रीडिंग। Then Marriage between close relatives who have one or more ancestors is consanguineous marriage and non-consanguineous marriage. ये दोनों भी आपको समझा दिए. But yes, there is a difference that you must be kept in mind. Consanguinity, it refers to marriage type, whereas inbreeding refers to mating pattern. So both are interchangeable, but um, sometimes it may happen that there has been marriage but no kids. So this situation is quite rampant, and in such a case, we cannot equate marriage with mating, because mating is clearly related to the production of children, kids, whereas marriage is an institutional type. It is the institution that controls the life of a couple, the issues and custom related to the living together of a couple. So here is a slight distinction. So whenever you get confused, just remember that consanguineous is a marriage type. But if the same marriage type, if it results in children, then it will be known as mating. Fair. In positive assortative mating, individuals tend to choose mates who resemble themselves in native language, intelligence, stature, skin color, musical talent, athletic ability और जो भी जितने भी criteria हैं. So this is a kind of positive assortative mating जो हम generally जितने भी शादी के proposals होते हैं उसमें देखते हैं. Then in negative assortative mating pairs are dissimilar in phenotypes than would be expected by chance. So in this negative type, such preferences are not put forward, or even if they are put forward, such preferences, such criteria are not met. So let's take the example of refugee colony, refugees, or you can say the war prisoners, or the migrations, immigrants, emigrants. अब इन सब cases में let's say a person, a man from, let's say, Kenya, because of some issue, he got established himself into North Korea, and for some reason he couldn't get out from that country. So he took the permanent citizenship. Now that's the person, he found one mate in that population, North Korean population. Now the whole racial stocks are different. The Kenyan is a Negroid, whereas a North Korean is a Mongoloid. So they are biological and physical differences are there, let alone the other differences, other cultural, linguistic, social differences. Biological differences are glaring enough. A person would have a skin complexion of a dark skin complexion, whereas the North Korean will have a wheatish complexion. Then this stature, physical stature will also be different. So there are many glaring and visible differences, but yet some such mates or some such knots are tied, and somehow they got together. So this kind of mating, it is known as non negative assortative mating. All societies have rules which forbid marriage between close relatives, such as parents, offspring, and siblings. And those relations, those restrictions, they are known by incest taboo. So incest taboo are the prohibitionary rules that restrict people from mating between blood relatives, especially between parents and then children and siblings. There are strict relations. As I have said, the strict prohibition of mating pattern. So, and mating, mating is a part of marriage as an institution. Marriage is an umbrella institution which covers not only mating but also other rearing practices, which include the responsibility of household and family to uh, live in peaceful coexistence, to manage the finances of the household, to look after the elderly and children. So all these dimensions they together and the customs they built up into an institution known as marriage. While mating is confined enough, just confined to producing children. So incest taboo are the prohibitory mating rules which restrict mating between or producing children between close blood relatives. And it is a universal feature of human society because almost all society have such incest taboo. Then the most common form of consanguinity. Consanguinity here means marriage between blood relatives. So most common form is cousin marriage. So here the incest taboo is ardently managed, लेकिन उसके बाद cousins are there. So this is common form. Then marriage between children of sibling of same sex, parallel cousins, is prohibited except in some Islamic society in Middle East where marriage between a man and his father's brother's daughter is common. So another instance, just as I said, marriage can also be clubbed into prohibitory and preferential. So preferential का तो आपको बता दिया sortative mating. Then parallel prohibition में incest के बाद number one is incest is clearly strictly prohibited. Then parallel cousin marriage is also prohibited. So parallel cousins are children of the siblings of the same sex. Three criteria: children of siblings of same sex, same same gender. So let's take example a pedigree chart. Here is a grandfather and grandmother. Now their children C and D. I can explain here in this pedigree chart. So A and B, this one, it stands for male, square stand for male, and circle stand for female. So he is a grandfather, she is a grandmother, and they have two children, C and D. So C is a female, C is a male, and D is a female. Now, parallel cousin happened when both of them they were of same sex. Let's say C and D both are male and their children, if they marry among themselves, this would be known as parallel cousin marriage, which is prohibited. In your case, let's take example of one person, his grandfather, and C is his father, D is uncle, and E is he himself. Now he marries daughter of his uncle. So this is a case of parallel cousin, which is prohibited and but still prevalent in many Middle Eastern societies. As you can see here, many society Middle East, when a man and his father's brother means uncle's daughter, is a case of parallel cousin marriage. And there are also certain areas, South India, Japan, where marriage observed between children of opposite sex, cross cousin. So cross cousin marriage, it is the same case, but instead of a sibling of same sex, as in case of father and uncle, it is between the siblings of opposite sex, which means father and your maternal aunt, your paternal aunt, which in India, bua. So marriage between you and your bua's daughter, it will be a cross cousin marriage. And if you are not aware of about such pedigree chart, let me elaborate it further. So as I've said, square stand for male, circle stand for female. And to study any pedigree chart, you need to place the person by whom relations need to be traced, and that person known as ego. So let's say we are talking about E. So E here will be ego. So it's from his relation that all the other relations will be traced. So A will be E's grandfather, B will be grandmother. In that case, C will be his father, D will be his Bua, paternal aunt. So this case, the marriage between E and F, which is daughter of paternal aunt, marriage between them, it will be known as cross cousin marriage. Then here G will be son of E and H will be daughter of F. Then the marriage between G and H, it will be known as second cousin marriage. And as I've said, cross cousin marriage between E and F, it will be first cousin marriage. But if E, if he marries the daughter of his cousin, then this marriage between E and H, it is known as first cousin once removed. In the same way, a diagonal relationship between the son of G and the daughter of H, this diagonal relationship will be known as second cousin once removed. And this is how a pedigree chart is read. You can take any person. All you need to do is remember that this stand for male, this stand for female. You need to place a person, you need to make a person as ego from which you need to trace all the relationship, and this is how the pedigree chart is read. So first cousin marriage make up almost 10%. So first cousin marriage, the marriage between E and F. So again, I explain it. E is ego. That is, it's best if you understand it as some persona non grata, means when you need to place some person from which you will be able to understand it better. So let's say it's you. Then again, your grandfather, your grandmother, your father, your paternal aunt. Then this is daughter of paternal aunt. This is you. The marriage between you and the daughter of paternal aunt, Bua ki ladki. This will be known as parallel cousin. Sorry, first cross cousin, or in short, it can be taken as first cousins. Then, as it's mentioned here, this type of marriage, first cousin, it makes almost 10%. And as you know, the other relations or other contact type, they further deviates from the family tree and the equation of consanguinity, then it becomes less of an issue. Because if the daughter of son of you, if he marries the daughter of your bua ki ladki, then this, you know, you can see the gap. So the consanguinity issue here, it is also there, but it further decreases. The uh, the more the gap between this family tree, the less will be harmful effects of consanguinity. Then in southern India, especially in state of Andhra Pradesh, among certain castes, uncle-niece union also make 10% of marriage. So uncle-niece, which means first cousin once removed. So here, if this is you, E, and in that case, H will be your niece. So this diagonal marriage, EH, it is known as first cousin once removed, and it is prevalent in 10% of cases in Andhra Pradesh. Then Let's look at the chart here, look at the block here. People choose partners for marriage. So as I've said, marriage is different situation and mating is another kind. And they do not contribute the same number of children to the next generation. So that's why I said mating is different than marriage. The marriage practice change allele frequency in the population because it's a marriage that is going to result in mating and production of children. So when children are produced, again the same uh, evolutionary process, the zygote formation via meiosis, and it will assort the available gene in diploids in binary form in two alleles, and the best of the genes are taken or inherited. And such genes will travel down the line. And if the parents, mother and father, if they are also suffering from any ailment and both of them are equally susceptible to it, then the children is going to suffer from it. So that's the another side of coin. Um, the front side is that if mother and father both have good genes, then children are likely to inherit the best of the genes. If they are bad genes, both of them they have bad genes, then children are likely to inherit the same negative consequences. Then consanguinity and endogamy increase the proportion of homozygotes in the population. Yes. अब ये जो चीज है, this is the gist of the whole chapter. Consanguinity and endogamy, both of these, let's explain it in detail. Consanguinity and endogamy. Well, both are marriage types. First, they are not mating types, but marriage are there for mating. There is only difference of fertility and other factors, such as some people do not want to have children, and there may be some fertility related issue, or maybe there is a issues with procreation. So if other factors are not taken into account, then marriage can be equated with mating. So consanguinity and endogamy, both of them, they are result in homozygotes. Whereas nature, as I have said, nature prefers heterosis. In previous chapter, we have studied in detail about heterozygote advantage, which means nature prefers heterozygotes in most of the conditions. So this situation is reversed, especially in consanguinity and endogamy. How? So let's say this is the pool of population, and you are marrying among your own relatives. So in that case, there will be two consequences. First, non-infusion of non-infusion of fresh genes or non-infusion of diverse genes. And then second issue will be repetition of same genes. Because if you are marrying within your family, the same pedigree chart, this is your grandfather, your grandmother, then your father, your mother, and here your bua and your fufaji. Now the situation will be here that this kid, ego, that's you, if he marries daughter of his paternal line, son in the square, in this particular case, when you look at it closely, the people that are involved here you can see the family tree, whichever line you trace it to. So let's say you are tracing it via the paternal line. So you can see here the fresh infusion of genes from outside, it happened first at the level of grandmother. The first source of outside gene was your grandmother, then your mother. But you can see here there is a certain repetition of genes from your father's side and your paternal aunt side, because your father and paternal aunt, both of them, they directly belong to your grandfather. So if your grandfather, if he had certain genes, even if they were good or bad, those same genes will be associated in the next population, and they would have inherited by your father and your paternal aunt. Then the same genes, they were inherited by you and the daughter of your paternal aunt. So in this case, this assortative mating, sorry, this repetition of DNA, repetition of DNA or repetition of genes without much diversity, without much infusion of outside genes, it results in lethal consequences or harmful consequences. Why? Because first, there is a lack of diversity, and second, if you look at it closely, you are inherited the same gene pool, and it happens that if same gene pool is inherited across um, a long time, which happens especially in consanguineous marriage, because in non-consanguineous marriage there is extra additional infusion of fresh genes. So this infusion of fresh genes, it dampens the deleterious effects of homozygotes. But if the same genes are transmitted, that situation, it leads to integration of, you can say, inheritance or transmission of homozygotes. This condition, it takes this form. In other words, A, B, C. Let's take it very simple. If the same genes, A has certain genes which will be inherited by B in diploid form, two forms. And as you know, nature will inherit the best of the genes available. Now, B has these two forms and the same genes will be inherited by C. Now, broaden this equation. Let's say A has another kid, C, and now its daughter D. So यहाँ पे चेंज कुछ नहीं हुआ है, बस एक और फैमिली लाइन ड्रॉ हुई है. अदर देन दैट जीन पूल इज सेम. तो सोर्स ए, जो उनके डिसेंडेंट्स में जो जीन्स होंगे, दोज जीन्स विल बी सिमिलर टू द जीन्स इनहेरिटेड बाय ए. सो इन दैट केस यहाँ पे सी एंड डी में भी वही जीन्स होंगे. और प्रॉब्लम यहाँ पे ऐसे आती है व्हेन हेटेरोसिस इज टेकन इनटू अकाउंट. सो यहाँ पे लेट्स से सी के अंदर कोई भी जीन आया, लेट्स से हाइट का आया, टॉल फॉर डोमिनेंट, टी फॉर रिसेसिव. अब नेचर जो है वो हेटेरोसिस या जो हेटेरोजाइगोट्स हैं उनको सेलेक्ट करेगा. तो यहाँ भी टी हो गया, यहाँ भी टी हो गया. अब इसका पनेट स्क्वायर देखते हैं. मदर एंड फादर. अब एक बच्चा है, उसके अंदर दोनों होंगे. फिर दूसरे के अंदर हेटेरोजाइगस डोमिनेंट, तीसरे के अंदर हेटेरोजाइगस डोमिनेंट, चौथे के अंदर रिसेसिव. अब ये देखिए, यहाँ पे 3 केसेस हैं जिनके अंदर रिसेसिव्स हैं. ये हो गया फर्स्ट जनरेशन. अब यही फर्स्ट जनरेशन है. लेट्स से ये जो फोर्थ चाइल्ड है, ये वापस अपने ही साथ एक रिसेसिव के साथ सेकेंड जनरेशन लेते हैं और यहाँ पे एक हेटेरोजाइगस डोमिनेंट और एक होमोजाइगस रिसेसिव ले लेते हैं एम एंड एफ। तो यहाँ पे होमोजाइगस डोमिनेंट कैपिटल टी एंड स्मॉल टी एंड होमोजाइगस रिसेसिव दोनों टी। अब इस केस में इक्वेशन देखिए, इनमें लेट्स से 4 बच्चे पैदा होते हैं, एक होगा हेटेरोजाइगस डोमिनेंट, बाकी तीसरा बच्चा फिर हेटेरोजाइगस डोमिनेंट एंड चौथा बच्चा रिसेसिव। तो इस फर्स्ट जनरेशन और सेकंड जनरेशन में देखिए, फर्स्ट जनरेशन में 3 डोमिनेंट ट्रेट, सेकंड जनरेशन में सिर्फ 2 ही डोमिनेंट है, 2 रिसेसिव है। लेट्स टेक, अब यही थर्ड कजन तक जाएगा एंड जीन पूल इज सेम, कुछ एक्स्ट्रा इंक्लूजन है ही नहीं, तो यही रिपीट हो रहा है। अब लेट्स से इन 2 कजन मैरिज में, जो क्रॉस कजन मैरिज है, अब इसमें मान लो इन दोनों के बीच ही हो रहा है, मेल एंड फीमेल, अब दोनों ही होमोजाइगस रिसेसिव है, तो इनके मेट्स में जो जो इनके ऑफस्प्रिंग होंगे, ऑल ऑफ देम दे आर होमोजाइगस रिसेसिव। तो ये आप प्रोपोर्शंस देख सकते हैं, फर्स्ट के अंदर 3 डोमिनेंट, फिर सेकंड के अंदर 2 डोमिनेंट 2 रिसेसिव, थर्ड के अंदर चारों के चारों रिसेसिव। So this is known as homozygosity, and this is the consequence of both consanguinity and endogamy जो यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है. So this is it. Next topic में we'll talk about effects of consanguineous marriage. Thank you very much.